I'm a bus driver, so I've learned over the years that you meet all kinds of people behind the wheel. Most passengers are perfectly normal. They get on, pay their fare, find a seat, and go about their day. Some are friendly and will chat with you. Others barely acknowledge that you exist, which is completely fine with me. I'm not expecting everyone to make conversation. Then there are the passengers who somehow manage to turn a routine bus ride into a full-blown confrontation. A while back, I had one of those passengers. I was driving my usual route, and the bus was already pretty crowded. We had quite a few people standing, and there wasn't exactly a ton of room to spare. At one of the stops, a woman boarded with her child and her boyfriend. They also had a bicycle with them. Now, bicycles are allowed on the buses in certain circumstances, but there are rules about where they go. If the bike rack is available, passengers are supposed to use it rather than bringing the bicycle onto a crowded bus. That day, the bike rack was completely empty. So when the woman tried to bring the bicycle onto the bus, I calmly told her that she needed to use the bike rack. There was nothing unusual or confrontational about how I said it. I wasn't trying to embarrass her or make her life difficult. I was simply doing my job and following the rules. She did not take it well. She immediately started arguing with me. I explained again that the bike rack was available and that the bus was already full. Bringing the bicycle inside would take up valuable space and could create a safety problem for the other passengers. Instead of accepting that, she started yelling, and I mean really yelling. She told me she was allowed to bring the bicycle inside and that I had no right to tell her otherwise. I tried to keep my voice calm. Anyone who has worked with the public knows that there's a point where arguing back only makes things worse. My job was to drive the bus safely, not win an argument with a passenger. Unfortunately, she wasn't interested in calming down. She continued screaming at me, and then she started throwing around homophobic slurs. She was doing this in front of her own child. That part honestly bothered me more than the insults themselves. People can call me whatever they want. I've heard plenty of things from angry passengers over the years, but watching an adult behave like that in front of their child was embarrassing. I still didn't lose my temper. I told her that if she wanted to continue riding, she needed to follow the rules and stop disrupting the bus. She then took things a step further and threatened to physically assault me. At that point, this was no longer just a disagreement about a bicycle. I wasn't going to risk a physical confrontation while I was responsible for a bus full of passengers. So I called my supervisor. My supervisor came out to the bus and spoke with the woman. Once someone from management arrived, she finally started calming down. My supervisor explained the situation and told her that she could continue riding, but if she caused another disturbance, she would be removed from the bus. Eventually, she and her family continued on their way. I figured that was the end of it. I certainly wasn't sitting around thinking about her afterward. I drive a lot of routes and interact with hundreds of people. One unpleasant passenger usually becomes just another story from another shift. But apparently the story wasn't finished. Fast forward to today. I was driving the same route. Everything was completely normal. I was doing my job, following the schedule, picking people up at the designated stops, and continuing along the route. Then, just after I passed one of the stops, I looked in my mirror, and there she was. The same woman. She was running toward the bus. She was waving her arms and trying to get my attention. For a split second, I recognized her. I knew exactly who she was, and I also knew exactly where she was. She wasn't standing at the stop. She had missed the bus. I had already passed the designated stopping point. Under normal circumstances, if someone is actually waiting at a stop and the bus is approaching, I stop. That's my job. But this wasn't that situation. She had been late and was now running after a moving bus. I had already passed the stop. I kept driving. I didn't slam on the brakes. I didn't pull over. I didn't make some dramatic gesture at her. I simply continued along my route. She kept running and waving for a little while, but obviously there was no way she was going to catch the bus. And yes, I felt pretty good about it. Maybe that makes me petty. Maybe it does. But after the way she treated me the last time, I wasn't exactly motivated to go out of my way to help her. The important distinction is that I wasn't refusing to pick her up because I recognized her. If she had been standing at the bus stop when I arrived, I would have stopped. Absolutely. I'm not a monster. I have a job to do, and part of that job is picking up passengers who are properly waiting at designated stops. But when somebody misses the bus and starts chasing it down the street after I've already passed the stop, that's different. And when that person happens to be someone who previously screamed at me, called me disgusting names, and threatened to physically assault me, well, I'm not going to pretend I was heartbroken about leaving her behind. The funny thing is that I knew I was the only bus operating in that area for the rest of the night, so she wasn't going to have another bus come along 5 minutes later. She was going to have to wait, and honestly, I wasn't going to lose any sleep over it. I just kept driving. No confrontation, no argument, no revenge speech, just a bus continuing down its route. Sometimes the best response to someone who treated you terribly is simply refusing to go out of your way for them, and as I continued driving, I figured that was probably the end of the story. I was wrong again.
The rest of my shift continued normally. I didn't spend the next several hours obsessing over what had happened. I wasn't sitting behind the wheel laughing to myself or trying to figure out how much trouble the woman was going to have getting home. I just went back to doing my job. That's one thing I've learned as a bus driver. If you let every difficult passenger stay in your head, you'll never have any peace. There are people who complain about the fare, people who complain about the schedule, People who complain because the bus is too hot. People who complain because it's too cold. People who want you to stop somewhere you're not allowed to stop. People who run towards the bus after you've already left the stop. And occasionally, you get somebody who manages to combine all of those things with screaming, insults, and threats. You can't take every interaction personally. So, I moved on. At least I thought I had. Later in the shift, I was driving the same general route when I saw a familiar face boarding the bus. It was the woman's boyfriend. At first, I recognized him, but wasn't completely sure. Then he looked at me. I could tell he recognized me too. For a moment, I wondered whether I was about to have another confrontation. Given what had happened with his girlfriend previously, I wasn't sure what to expect. Maybe he was going to complain. Maybe he was going to defend her. Maybe he was going to start an argument about the bicycle. I prepared myself for the possibility that I'd have to call my supervisor again. Instead, something completely different happened. He apologized. He actually apologized to me for her behavior. He told me he was sorry about what had happened before and acknowledged that the way she had treated me was completely out of line. I was honestly surprised. I had assumed that because he had been there during the original incident, he might have agreed with her, or at least stayed silent. But apparently that wasn't the case. He was genuinely apologetic. And as we talked briefly, I realized something else. He was actually a really nice guy. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't looking for an argument. He wasn't trying to justify what she had done. He just wanted to acknowledge that her behavior had been wrong. That changed the way I looked at the whole situation. Because here's the thing. I never had a problem with him. My issue was with her behavior. There was no reason for me to hold a grudge against someone who hadn't done anything to me. So I accepted his apology. I told him it was okay, and that I appreciated him saying something. Then he went and found a seat. The whole interaction lasted only a few minutes, but it actually stuck with me. It reminded me that sometimes people who are connected to a difficult person aren't necessarily difficult themselves. You can't always judge somebody based on the person they're with. And honestly, his apology made me feel a little better about the whole situation. I still wasn't sorry that I'd kept driving when his girlfriend was running after the bus, but I also wasn't looking at him as part of that situation anymore. He had been respectful to me, and I respected him for owning what happened. As I continued driving, I started thinking about the original incident again. When she first boarded with the bicycle, there was such an easy way the whole thing could have gone. She could have asked a question. I could have explained the policy. She could have put the bicycle on the rack. Then she could have gotten on the bus and continued with her day. That's it. 5 minutes. Instead, the entire situation escalated because she refused to accept a simple instruction. And that's what always amazes me about public transportation. People sometimes seem to forget that bus drivers aren't personally responsible for the rules. I'm not sitting there inventing policies specifically to annoy individual passengers. If I tell you something about where your bike needs to go, where you need to stand, or where I can safely stop, I'm doing it because that's part of my job. I'm not making the rules up as I go. And when someone becomes aggressive because they don't like an answer, it doesn't change the answer. It just makes the situation worse. The original incident also made me think about her child. That kid had been right there while their mother screamed at me and used hateful language. Kids absorb everything. They see how adults react to frustration. They hear how adults speak to strangers. They learn what behavior is considered acceptable. I don't know anything about that child's life beyond that one moment, so I won't pretend to know what kind of parent she is overall. But that particular incident was disturbing to witness. The irony is that none of it had been necessary. The bike rack was empty. The bus was crowded. I gave her a simple instruction. If she had followed it, the entire incident would have lasted less than a minute. Instead, she turned it into something that required a supervisor to intervene. And then, weeks or months later, she ended up running after my bus. I wasn't responsible for making sure she caught it. I had already passed the stop. There was no reason for me to make an unsafe or unauthorized stop in the middle of the route. That's the part people might misunderstand if they hear the story without the details. I'm not saying bus drivers should randomly refuse to pick up people they don't like. That's not what happened. If someone is standing at a designated stop, I'm stopping for them. I don't care whether I've had an argument with them before. I don't care whether they annoyed me yesterday. I don't care whether I recognize them. If they're at the stop and I'm supposed to pick them up, I'll pick them up. That's the job. But there is a difference between doing your job and doing somebody a personal favor. She wasn't at the stop. She had missed the bus. She was chasing it. And I wasn't going to risk the seizure just because she was waving her arms. The fact that she was the same person who had previously threatened me was simply the icing on the cake. The funny part is that I didn't even know her boyfriend would later apologize.
If I had known that was coming, maybe I would have felt differently about the entire encounter. But I didn't. All I knew at the time was that I had been treated horribly by someone, and then later that same person was running after my bus. I kept going, and for once, the universe handed me a very simple choice. Do I make an exception for someone who has shown me absolutely no respect, or do I just keep doing my job? I chose the second option, and honestly, I think that was the right call.
After her boyfriend apologized, the whole situation felt strangely different. I had expected another confrontation when I saw him. Instead, I got an apology from someone who had absolutely no obligation to give me one. That actually earned my respect. He didn't make excuses for her. He didn't say, "That's just how she is." He didn't tell me I needed to understand why she was angry. He didn't blame me for enforcing the bus policy. He simply said he was sorry. Sometimes that's all it takes. I told him I appreciated it and that there were no hard feelings toward him. And I meant it. Whatever problems existed between him and his girlfriend were their business. I wasn't interested in getting involved. I'm a bus driver, not a relationship counselor. My job is to drive the bus safely and get people where they're going. That's enough drama for one profession. Looking back at the whole experience, the funniest part is how little actual revenge was involved. I didn't plan anything. I didn't track her down. I didn't refuse to let her board because I recognized her. I didn't make a scene when I saw her running. I didn't even say anything to her. I just passed the stop. That's it. Some people might say that was petty. Maybe it was. But I think there's a difference between deliberately hurting someone and simply refusing to inconvenience yourself for someone who has treated you badly. If she had been standing at the stop, I would have stopped. That's not negotiable. A bus driver can't pick and choose passengers based on personal feelings. If you're at the stop, you're a passenger. But if you miss the stop and start running after the bus, that's on you. I wasn't going to slam on the brakes. I wasn't going to stop somewhere I wasn't supposed to. And I certainly wasn't going to create a potentially dangerous situation because somebody didn't leave home early enough. Especially not after the previous incident. What made the situation satisfying wasn't that she missed the bus. It was that I didn't have to do anything. There was no confrontation, no shouting, no insults, no supervisor, no argument. I just drove away. And sometimes that's the best kind of outcome. You don't have to get revenge. You don't have to prove a point. You don't have to make someone regret what they did. Sometimes you simply let natural consequences happen. She missed the bus. She had to wait. That's life. And honestly, I hope she learned something from it. Not necessarily about me. Not necessarily about the bicycle. Just about treating people with a little more respect. Because the next bus driver she encounters might not be as patient as I was. The other thing I took away from this whole situation was the importance of separating people from their behavior. Her boyfriend could have easily taken her side. He could have gotten angry with me. He could have decided that because I had a problem with her, I must also have a problem with him. Instead, he apologized. And that told me a lot about him. People aren't always responsible for the behavior of the person they're with. He didn't choose her words for her. He didn't threaten me. He didn't call me names. He didn't cause the confrontation. So there was no reason for me to hold anything against him. In fact, after that brief conversation, I thought he seemed like a genuinely decent person. It's funny how one small interaction can completely change your perception of someone. Before that day, all I remembered was him standing there while his girlfriend was arguing with me. Afterward, I remembered him as the guy who got on my bus and voluntarily apologized for something he hadn't personally done. That's the version of him I'll remember. As for the woman, I don't wish anything bad on her. I really don't. I don't want her to have problems. I don't want her to get stranded somewhere dangerous. I don't want her to have a terrible day. I simply don't feel obligated to go above and beyond for her. There's a difference. If she shows up at my stop and follows the rules, I'll do my job exactly like I do for everyone else. If she has a bike and follows the proper procedure, I'll have no issue with her. If she asks a reasonable question, I'll answer it. If she needs to get somewhere, I'll drive the route. I'm not holding a grudge. But if she misses the bus and starts running after it, I'm probably still going to keep driving. Not because I hate her, not because I'm trying to punish her, and not because I'm some kind of monster. Because once the bus has passed the stop, the situation has changed. The passenger missed the bus. That's unfortunate, but it's not automatically the driver's responsibility to fix it. And after everything that happened before, I certainly wasn't going to volunteer myself for extra trouble. The entire thing reminded me of something I've learned from working with the public.
You never know when the person you're rude to today might be the person you need help from tomorrow. That doesn't mean people should be nice to others only because they might need something from them someday. People should be respectful because it's the right thing to do. But there is something satisfying about seeing how quickly circumstances can reverse. One day, you're screaming at the bus driver and threatening him because you don't like a bicycle policy. Another day, you're running down the street desperately trying to get that same driver's attention. And the driver? He's already gone. Again, I want to emphasize that I wasn't sitting there looking for an opportunity to get revenge. I didn't know she'd be at that stop. I didn't plan to pass her. It just happened. And when it happened, I made the simplest decision possible. I kept driving. Then later, completely unexpectedly, her boyfriend apologized. That was probably the best part of the whole story. The woman gave me a reason not to go out of my way for her. Her boyfriend gave me a reason to respect him. And I walked away from the entire situation without having to escalate anything. At the end of the day, that's what I want. I don't want drama. I don't want fights. I don't want angry passengers. I just want to drive my bus, follow the rules, and get everybody where they're going safely. Most days, that's exactly what happens. Every once in a while, someone makes things difficult. And every once in a while, life gives you a tiny moment of poetic justice. This happened to be one of those moments. She wasn't at the stop. I wasn't required to stop, so I didn't. And as the bus continued down the road, I couldn't help but smile a little. Sometimes the best revenge is simply staying on schedule.